Here we sit once more, stationed in the waiting area outside the office of the marriage therapist handpicked by my wife. Our weekly rendezvous with her marks the 12th occasion, though unbeknownst to the therapist, it also signifies our final encounter. I've orchestrated a surprise for both my wife and our counselor, envisioning a future where they convene without my presence to dissect where things veered off course. My wife can foot the bill this time. Tales of therapists like the one we're about to see circulate, yet I never fathomed enduring such an ordeal. I've dubbed her the Quack. She exudes a palpable disdain for men, and it's as straightforward as that. Her mission appears to center around validating women and their questionable conduct. Despite my objections, my wife insisted on her choice. No surprises there. We could have jointly selected a reputable therapist, conducted interviews, and fostered mutual trust in our decision, embarking on the arduous journey together. But alas, that wasn't the case. Jenny evidently sought to tilt the scales in her favor, controlling the narrative of our sessions. It's not that I harbor aversion to therapy, rather, I'm skeptical of the version we've been subjected to. Every grievance voiced by my wife inevitably circles back to me, accompanied by the refrain, "James, what you fail to grasp is your failure to fulfill your duties as a husband." Well, today marks the end of that cycle. Perhaps a bit of reflection on the journey leading to this juncture is in order. We tied the knot straight out of college a quarter-century ago. Our offspring, a son and a daughter, now college-bound themselves, are exemplary individuals, though don't ask me how they turned out that way. I endeavor to be the finest father possible, yet my wife's frequent absence led our children to affectionately dub me Dom, short for Daddy Mom, as I assumed both parental roles. Initially, I bristled at the moniker, but soon realized it symbolized my dual responsibilities. From packing their lunches to aiding with homework, shuttling them to sports events, meeting with teachers, and even handling household chores and meal prep, I wore multiple hats while my wife's presence waned. Her job, she insisted, was crucial, though it paid little, leaving her fatigued and disengaged upon returning home. Over time, her focus shifted outward, her discontent manifesting in complaints directed at me. I perpetually fell short, insufficient effort, erroneous execution, inadequate finances, subpar vacations, the litany of grievances knew no end. However, amidst this discontent, my children's gratitude served as a beacon of affirmation. Hearing their heartfelt declarations, "Dad, you're the best," validated the sacrifices and efforts invested, offering solace amid the storm of marital discord. You're probably familiar with the tale of the frog in boiling water. Well, that frog was me, and I had reached my boiling point, ready to leap out of the pot. Much of my adult life has been spent grappling with the complexities of my wife's upbringing. Raised in a household straight out of a psychological thriller, her childhood was marred by dysfunction of the darkest kind. Her mother's serial infidelity, veiled under the guise of innocent shopping trips, instilled in her a code of silence that masked the turmoil within their home. Meanwhile, her father, though not lacking in intelligence, was shackled by his own timidity, a mouse that roared only after drowning his inhibitions in alcohol. Their residence became a battlefield devoid of communication, camaraderie, or joy. For my wife, evenings meant retreating to her room, seeking refuge from the chaos that engulfed the rest of the house. It's hardly surprising that she emerged from such an environment bearing scars of deception and manipulation, traits that would shape her adulthood. It took me decades to grasp the extent of her brokenness, to realize that she was fundamentally incompatible with the concept of marriage. Yet, even as this understanding gnawed at me, my love for our children anchored me to the sinking ship of our relationship until they reached maturity. I, too, sought solace in therapy, detailing the recurring patterns and recounting my wife's tumultuous upbringing. However, my therapist gently redirected my focus inward, emphasizing that the only person I could change was myself. Through her guidance, I learned to prioritize self-care, to assert my own worth, and to resist being dragged into the abyss of my wife's desolation. My children became my raison d'etre, their well-being my primary concern, as I held on to hope that one day my wife might choose to reclaim her place within our family. As our children embarked on their college journeys, I sensed the impending finale drawing near. The unsustainable status quo weighed heavily on me, and I harbored little doubt that Jenny would soon detonate the remnants of our marriage. My therapist had shed light on a crucial insight. When raised amidst chaos, individuals acclimate to it. It sounded bizarre at first, but her explanation resonated deeply. Jenny's tendency to sabotage moments of tranquility stemmed from her subconscious affinity for chaos, a revelation that affirmed my sanity. Despite recognizing the pattern, I had struggled to accept it. Now, with our children pursuing higher education, our financial stability secured, the mortgage nearing its end, and ample leisure time beckoning, Jenny seemed destined to dismantle it all. My ruminations were abruptly interrupted by the creak of the office door, heralding the arrival of another couple into the waiting room. The husband wore a crestfallen expression, while his wife exuded an air of smug satisfaction. In that moment, I couldn't help but acknowledge the quack's adeptness at earning her fee. The routine played out as expected. We'd wait for the quack to conclude her notes from the previous session before the inevitable summons. "Jenny, I'm ready to see you and James now," her words serving as a thinly veiled invitation to the next sacrificial lamb. Seated on the couch, Jenny anticipated my customary position beside her, yet this time I opted for the chair to her right, my back turned to the door. "James, please sit with your wife," the quack interjected, visibly irked. Apologizing, I explained, "I prefer this vantage point. Besides, my back has been bothering me, and that sofa has never been accommodating." It was an understatement, to say the least. The quack's annoyance palpable, she prodded. "James, is there anything you wish to address following our last session?" "Yes, I have something to say. Despite our consistent efforts in therapy, I still can't shake the feeling that my wife is being unfaithful. It's a lingering doubt that persists, regardless of what's discussed here," I confessed, my voice heavy with unresolved suspicion. Without missing a beat, the quack interjected, preempting my wife's response. "James, as I've assured you before, I am certain that Jenny is not cheating on you. We've had discussions, and I firmly believe this is a product of your own imagination. It's time to let go of these unfounded suspicions and move forward." Before I could retort, she redirected her attention to my wife. "Jenny, what would you like to address today?" Her bias was glaringly apparent, wasn't it? Jenny wasted no time in pinpointing my alleged deficiency. "He doesn't support me." And just like that, she launched into her litany of grievances, citing instances of my supposed lack of support, complaints about her late work hours, or desire to socialize with friends. It was a familiar script, with Jenny airing her grievances and the quack nodding along in agreement, as if on cue. As Jenny continued her tirade, I allowed my thoughts to wander. I recalled a previous one-on-one session with the quack, where I tentatively broached my suspicions of infidelity, only to be swiftly dismissed and labeled as paranoid. Yet mere months later, my doubts solidified into certainty, rendering the quack's assurances obsolete as I geared up for confrontation. It took time to prepare, but... James, are you listening?" My reverie was abruptly shattered. "Huh. Oh, yeah, I heard. I don't support her," I replied, my tone resigned and laden with unresolved tension. "Jenny mentioned that you're neglecting her and her needs," the quack relayed, her tone tinged with exasperation. "You're unsupportive when she works late, and you exhibit jealousy when she seeks time with her friends." I couldn't shake the gnawing suspicion, but I keep circling back to this gut feeling that she's not faithful to our marriage. The quack's patience wore thin, her contempt barely concealed. "James, it's time to face reality and act like a man. I've already assured you she's not cheating on you. Your wife deserves a partner who can step up and fulfill his duties. If you persist with this behavior, perhaps she should seek someone who will." Her disdain was palpable as she shook her head in dismay. Turning to my wife, she prompted, "Jenny, you were saying." "He's neglecting household chores, like cutting the lawn and painting the house." Jenny launched in her litany of complaints, her grievances echoing in the room. As she prattled on, I couldn't help but think, I can predict this tune after just a few notes. It seemed I had let my thoughts slip, a careless lapse on my part. "James, what's amusing you? This is serious," The quack snapped me back to attention. "Sorry," I muttered, offering the most insincere of apologies, my mind drifting once more as Jenny continued her tirade. Jenny always insisted on driving separately to her sessions with the quack. I could easily pick her up, but that would never suffice. And after each meeting, she mysteriously became unavailable in the afternoons. It took time, but I eventually caught on. Hiring a private investigator, I uncovered the truth. She rendezvoused with Henry Walker at the Best Western every Thursday afternoon. It wasn't sporadic, it was a long-standing affair. Yet even in her infidelity, she maintained distance, revealing a deeper brokenness within her. They had a standing reservation, making it a breeze for my private investigator to install a camera and recorder in their usual meeting room. Once I had that evidence, therapy sessions became a waiting game while I meticulously prepared my strategy. Now, I had 3 adversaries in my sights: my wife, Henry, and the quack. When the time was ripe, I paid a visit to Henry's wife and provided her with copies of the incriminating evidence. Despite her health issues, my lawyer assured me that she could legally leverage Henry's infidelity to her advantage in the divorce settlement. It seemed like the perfect retribution I had been seeking. James, are you listening?" The quack's voice pierced through my thoughts. "Huh?" "Oh, yeah," I heard. "The house needs a new coat of paint," I replied absent-mindedly. "Well," she prompted, but before I could respond, there was a sudden knock on the door. "Who the hell is that?" The quack rose from her seat in annoyance. "I'll get it. It's for me anyway," I interjected, swiftly moving to answer the door. "This is a session, James. Sacred time. What do you mean arranging something outside?" The quack's protest trailed off as I swung the door open. Standing before me were Henry and his wife Eva, the latter appearing determined despite her frailty. "Welcome. Just in time. I'm glad you could make it. Come on in," I greeted them warmly. Henry seemed bewildered, while Eva exuded a sense of purpose, her hand trembling as she leaned on her cane. With resolute steps, she entered the room. Henry, evidently unaware of my identity, extended his hand and confessed, "My wife made this appointment. I honestly don't know exactly why we're here." "Allow me to explain, Henry," I began, gesturing towards my wife seated on the sofa. "You know my wife, Jenny, don't you?" As the realization dawned on him, I witnessed the color drain from Henry's face, leaving him pale and shaken. I don't," Henry stammered, clearly flustered. "No need to fib, Henry. We're all friends here. Therapy sessions are a safe place," I quipped, borrowing a line from my first session with the quack. Coincidentally, she chose that moment to interject. "James, what is going on here? How can you interrupt a session like this?" The quack's voice brimmed with indignation. "Sorry, Miss Collins, this is Henry Walker," I clarified, my tone steely. "He and my wife have been involved in an affair for almost a year now. And before you dismiss it as imagination, I have ample evidence, photographs and videos of their rendezvous at the Best Western." Turning to Henry, I continued, "Henry, why don't you take a seat next to Jenny? If you can engage in intimate acts with her, you can at least sit beside her as we address this issue." Then, turning to Eva, I offered, "Eva, it's always a pleasure to see you. Would you like this chair? It's surprisingly comfortable." With a grateful smile, Eva settled into the chair, her gaze piercing Henry with silent accusation. Taking the seat opposite her, I positioned myself so the coffee table lay between us, Jenny and Henry on my right, and the quack on my left, her expression akin to a startled fish. "So, isn't this cozy?" I remarked casually. "Eva, you're looking radiant as always. How are you feeling today?" "Better than most days, James. Thank you for asking. I believe a weight is about to be lifted off my shoulders," Eva replied, her optimism palpable. I couldn't help but smile at her resilience. Eva was facing real challenges, yet her spirit remained unbroken. "So, Ms. Collins was telling me earlier that my suspicions of Jenny's infidelity are all in my head," I continued, directing the conversation. Eva chuckled at that remark, her laughter echoing in the room. Glancing around, I addressed the group. "Who's interested in seeing the evidence?" I brought my tablet if anyone wants to view the footage. Then, fixing my gaze on the quack, I added, "How about you? Care to witness that despicable act of adultery you claimed didn't exist?" "No." You seem rather silent all of a sudden. Addressing Henry, I expressed, "Henry, you may have crossed a line by being involved with my wife, but despite her deceit, I've been her husband for a significant period, and I still feel accountable for her welfare. However, your approach to intimacy with her is concerning. It's not about making love. It seems more transactional, like that of a prostitute or a cat. Perhaps that's what she desires at this moment, Jenny." I turned to Jenny, adding, "Had I known your preference for such treatment, maybe you wouldn't have sought solace in the arms of such a despicable coward." Her unexpected tears caught me off guard. I couldn't fathom the reason behind them. Our marriage had unraveled. Henry's marriage had unraveled. She had the freedom to pursue any man she desired. So why the sudden outpouring of emotion? All she stood to lose was me, and she had never shown any real desire for me, except perhaps for the stability I provided, an emotional anchor she couldn't furnish herself. Finally, Jenny found her voice amidst her tears. "I never intended for you to find out. I'm sorry, James. I never meant to cause you pain," she lamented, reciting the tired cliches of a remorseful cheater. It bordered on pathetic, almost laughable. "Save the theatrics, Jenny. You've had a year to reflect on your actions," I retorted, unimpressed. Turning to the sorry excuse for a man beside her, I continued, "And what about you? Your wife has sacrificed for you, raising your children, even with her special needs. And this is how you repay her? Sneaking around behind her back. Have you ever considered facing your responsibilities like a man and being honest for once in your life?" I could sense the anger simmering beneath his surface, but I was more than ready to face it if given the chance. But that opportunity never came. In the end, they both sat there, offering feeble excuses and hollow apologies, until another knock on the door broke the tense silence. "Oops," I glanced at Eva. "Looks like our final guest has arrived." Up until this point, the quack had remained surprisingly quiet. Her silence prompted a second outburst, to which I simply shrugged before opening the door. A middle-aged man in a cheap suit stepped into the office, and I gestured toward the sofa. "That's them." Approaching the two cheaters, he handed each a manila envelope and solemnly declared, "Jenny Harris, Henry Walker, you have been served." With a snap of his camera, he concluded his task and departed without another word. It seems serving legal papers in a marriage therapist's office was a novelty for him, evident from the wicked grin he flashed me as he exited. Closing the door behind him, I returned to my seat. "Well, this has certainly been eventful, hasn't it? It seems our time is nearly up," I remarked, glancing at the clock on the wall. "Perhaps Ms. Collins can spend the remaining minutes helping the cheaters process today's events." Turning to the quack, I added with a touch of sarcasm, "And maybe you can contemplate how you managed to get it all so wrong." Rising from my seat, I assisted Eva to her feet and linked her arm with mine as we exited the office. As we strolled down the hall, I inquired, "Are you going to be okay?" "I think so. When you first showed me the evidence of their betrayal, I was devastated. I questioned how the man I married could betray me like that. But now I realize he isn't the man I thought he was, or perhaps never was. All I'm losing is a memory or an illusion of what I thought I had and didn't," Eva reflected. Her words struck a chord, resonating with the realization that she spoke not only for herself, but for both of us. She looked at me with a mix of sadness and resilience. "I still have my children, and soon my grandchildren will come along. I'll be okay. You also have friends. Don't forget that. And who knows? Maybe in time you might count me among them," I offered. A sad smile graced her lips as she gently patted my arm. "I already do." "In that case, how about having lunch with a friend?" I suggested. Her expression brightened, a genuine smile breaking through. "I'd love that." Driving our own cars to the restaurant, our lunch began with a somber air as we silently revisited the events of the day. We had anticipated this moment, planned for it together, yet it still marked the end of two marriages and the lives we had once envisioned. We shared memories and thoughts about the couple we had confronted earlier, gradually shifting the conversation towards moving forward. Discussions about our children and local happenings infused the atmosphere with a glimmer of hope. Discovering mutual friends, we found solace in the knowledge that support surrounded us. Once this is all behind us, our friends will probably try setting us up on blind dates with their single acquaintances, I remarked, shuddering at the notion. She chuckled softly. It might not be as dreadful as you think. Who knows? You might even enjoy it. I shook my head with a sigh, unable to entertain the idea. Yet, as our conversation continued, optimism began to bloom, casting a hopeful light on both our futures. Upon arriving home, I found myself unconcerned with the whereabouts or actions of the cheaters, whether they departed together to strategize their defense, sought legal counsel, or simply headed for their usual clandestine meeting spot. Perhaps Jenny had given Henry a ride, as Eva likely had their car. But as expected, it wasn't that straightforward. Jenny returned home later, armed with a barrage of apologies interspersed with blame shifting, an age-old tactic where a woman's infidelity is somehow partially attributed to her husband's supposed shortcomings. I couldn't help but wonder if the quack was still guiding her. As Jenny's apologies dwindled into tears, I knew it was time for my own statement. Keeping it concise and direct, I addressed her solemnly. Jenny, throughout our marriage, I've harbored sympathy for you. Your upbringing was fraught with turmoil, and I believe that with a loving marriage, you could heal and evolve into the woman you aspired to be. However, what I failed to realize is that you're not capable of healing. You're fundamentally broken. Despite our progress, whenever life took a positive turn, you would sabotage it. Happiness eludes you. You're familiar only with sorrow and ruin. I can no longer endure that existence, nor can I tolerate living with a deceitful and unfaithful partner. Our journey together ends here, Jenny. Our children have grown, and it's time for us to forge our separate paths. After letting my words sink in for a moment, I concluded, Jenny, you truly need help. Not from that quack who merely validates your actions and excuses your behavior. Seek out genuine therapy, and when you do, allow the therapist to take the lead. I know you have a tendency to control everything, but true progress can only be made if you relinquish that control. Find a skilled professional who can guide you through a journey of self-exploration, helping you confront the ghosts and demons of your past. Promise me that you'll seek real help. I doubted she fully grasped the gravity of my words. Her mind was clouded with too many barriers preventing her from accepting guidance. Sadly, she lacked the courage to confront her inner demons. I'll admit, I wrestled with the decision to divorce Jenny. I kept returning to my vows, recalling the commitment of in sickness and in health. There was no denying that Jenny was unwell. However, I ultimately realized that regardless of her condition, she understood the distinction between right and wrong. Betrayal is betrayal, sick or not. It's been 3 years since that pivotal therapy session, and I've since moved on. The divorce was finalized just over 2 years ago, with our lives divided down the middle, and a 3-year support order was put in place, which now has less than a year remaining. Through this ordeal, I've come to understand that when love dissipates and anger subsides, what lingers is a profound sense of sadness and loss. I mourned not only for what was lost, but also for what could have been, though truth be told, that sense of loss had long preceded the divorce, if it ever truly existed at all. But life doesn't permit dwelling on losses. I relocated across town, leaned on my friends who provided invaluable support, and reconstructed my life with a renewed focus on the passions and interests I had too often set aside to accommodate my ex-wife's desires. Along this journey, I encountered a remarkable woman who shares my interests. Both of us carry scars from past hurts, so we're proceeding cautiously. Optimism colors my outlook, but I'm in no rush. As for Henry, he received a reprieve. Revenge wasn't worth risking imprisonment. More importantly, Eva relied on his financial support, so he got what was owed. This whole experience has imparted a crucial lesson. We possess the capacity to rebuild a fulfilling life by remaining true to ourselves, looking ahead, and seizing the opportunities life presents. As for my ex-wife, I doubt she'll ever find true happiness. It's not in her nature to embrace life's joys and live fully. She'll forever chase elusive desires, sacrificing what truly matters along the way, while failing to invest in the lives around her. It's saddening, but I've come to accept that I cannot change her. All I can do is forge ahead. Thank you for watching this video to the end. If you liked it, please like it and subscribe to the channel. See you soon.